one, but all right.
Coming up here.
Yep.
All right.
Hi, YouTube. How you doing?
Morning, folks. A little behind. We were catching up. Chad. Scott and I hadn't talked in a couple weeks, so we were catching up there a little bit. All right. That there. Let's get on here and hit record. Hello there, and welcome to the Hawkeye Hotspot podcast here on hawkfanatic.com. It is Thursday, March the 6th, about 9:20 a.m. Central Time. I am Rob Howe, trying to stay out of the sunlight here. If you're on YouTube, hit that. I should know better than this. It happens to me every week, but it feels good, actually, Scott, with the weather we've had the last few
Uh,
days. The sun feels good. Scott Doctorman from The Athletic with me. Back on the road. He was in Indianapolis for the combine. He got snowed in Ames the other night. So it probably feels good to be home, huh?
it does. Yeah. I mean, yesterday, there's nothing like getting snowed in on a night where you're like not expecting to be. So then you don't have any like clothes with you or anything
Yeah.
else. And it's like stopped at a hotel in Ames, stayed there till, early afternoon yesterday. And it was just, yeah. But yeah, I'm home after, from Monday through Saturday last week in Indy and week before that in New Orleans. Next week it'll be Indy again for the men's tournament. So I'm enjoying my brief period of time at home. I can't wait. And then tonight it'll be Carver Hawkeye Arena.
Yeah, we appreciate you taking time for the podcast. And yeah, tonight the men are at Carver Hawkeye Arena. The women are in Indianapolis against Michigan State. We're going to talk about those things. We're going to talk about the combine. We're going to talk about the departure of Liddell Betts, uh, the hiring of Warren Ruggiero. Still trying to work on that pronunciation. I know I talked about that Tuesday's podcast. I'm going with Ruggiero for now until I'm told differently. So if somebody out there knows I'm mispronouncing it, please let me know. I'm sure you will. And Iowa landed a football recruit in the 2026 class last night. So some plenty of news with football going on here. Spring football, not that far away, so we'll hit on that. We'll
Yeah.
do the basketball before the break. We'll do the football after the break, and we'll jump in right here with the Iowa women. The contrast of the Wisconsin game on Sunday for Senior Day uh, and last night, Scott, was stark. And it's not surprising when you think about kind of what the situations were with that. Sunday, it was Senior Day, a lot of emotion. Wisconsin played very well, better than it normally plays. Iowa was a little off, not as bad as the Northwestern game, but just kind of. And to Iowa's credit, it's been able to figure out how to grind games because there are going to be games like that you need to grind out. So it was a positive that they got through that the way they did on Sunday and finish it off. And then last night, I just felt like they looked as connected as they've looked during the parts of this last part of the season when they've played really well.
Yeah, exactly. The first game I thought Wisconsin played really hard, really well. Iowa struggled a little bit in that first half. Went to halftime, it was tied, and with Wisconsin, they've lost to Iowa now and after last night 31 times in a row. I mean, they want to play well. They've got a really good player. I think Sarah Williams, it's like, how are you still at Wisconsin in today's age? But and maybe we won't be asking that question after this year. Who knows the way the world.
Man, if that team had guards,
Yeah.
because they have two really good post players,
Yeah,
Wisconsin.
exactly. Yeah, right. I think McCray is also really good
Yeah.
and but then last night was Iowa operating at a very high efficient level. Everybody was they went on that 19-0 run there at the
Yeah.
end of the first quarter. It was just again, and I think the best part of that, Rob, was in the third quarter, they were able to just pull the most of the starters and off and just let the freshmen play. It was good for them, probably from a mental health perspective, which, hey, we're playing in a Big Ten tournament and we're all five playing together. But then more importantly, it allows those players to rest up because it could be a long tournament. I mean, 5 games in 5 days. They're the best 11 seed in tournament history of any tournament, in my opinion. And so having the opportunity where Lucy Olsen only plays 22 minutes, and you have Leah Guyton leads the team in minutes, and and Taylor Stremlo's right there with her. It's to me, it was a positive in every single facet last night.
Yeah, the list of teams that have won 5 games in 5 days to win conference tournaments is really short.
Yeah.
So
what was it, like UConn and maybe NC State men?
yeah, it's not very likely to happen. So what, as Scott said, what Iowa was able to do last night with its starters and giving the younger players some minutes, and I think, back in November, December, when people were wringing their hands a little bit about Jan and let's play the freshmen I think that's kind of worked itself out. And I think we kind of see that Jan knows what she's doing. And I think we saw last night the freshmen had some wow moments, but they also let that lead shrink down. And it was like, oh shit, let's put the starters back in. So I think we saw last night just kind of what this team is. It's a veteran team with some grinders that have really settled into their roles now. A superstar in Lucy Olson, a dominant post combination, I think you could say, because you know what? I don't think enough people have given Addie O'Grady her flowers this year, Scott. She's been really good.
Yeah, she has been. I want you could look at this season, Rob, in a couple of moves, a couple of things that happened that turned them from being 2-6 in the Big Ten and losing all those close games to now winning 9 out of the last 11, and the only 2 losses. One was when they had an open shot to win it, and the other one was in overtime on the road against a really good team. And I think one is, and this one is the most important by far and away to me, and that is Lucy Olson going from being lacking confidence, struggling in all these areas because everybody was playing off of her. And when they didn't, everybody, Jan and everybody was trying to figure out, well, how do we compensate here without having this player do what we really needed her to do? But once she figured it out, it changed everything, the dynamic. The other part is largely, except for maybe the UCLA game, that they've decided to go with more of a 4-guard, 1-post rotation in the post with Hannah Stolke and Addie O'Grady. And so they've kind of done like hockey line changes, kind of the way Iowa was with Woodbury and Gabe Olashaney about 10 years ago. And that's worked really well. I think that, if they need to have them on the floor together, that's fine. But Stolke is a pretty good post. And then, of course, Addie O'Grady has done a really nice job. She's really good with her jumpers and blocked shots. I mean, she's done a really nice job. And I think having that has allowed everybody else to fill their roles. Sydney Falter, talk about a garbage collector. I mean, just does everything you want her to do. A dog and
relentless. She's just relentless. I mean, that's how somebody that isn't the most, how do I put this without being mean, athletically gifted, to succeed, you got to be just relentless.
And she is. She's out there. She gets everything she needs. She's in great position. She's tough. You can tell she's tough. Southside Sid is more than just a nickname. And she scores when she's open. And she's kind of that every player you need. She can fill any role. She can bring the ball up. She can shoot threes. She can get down in the post. She can defend the post. She can rebound. And for her size, there's really nobody better as far as rebounding goes. And she's tough and she's the leader. I mean, she fills so many roles that I was really surprised that she didn't get honorable mention, I think, by the coaches. I was like, are you kidding me? That needs that kind of acclaim. And Hannah Stolke is very talented and has done a nice job. But then you look at the other people who filled their roles at a different level than last year. Kylie Feuerbach was just come in, play good defense for 4 minutes, maybe hit a couple open shots, move the ball around, and then go back to the bench. This year, she's at 20+ minutes a game. She's starting. She's more than just a 3-and-D player. She's really expanded it. Great, best on-ball defender they have. Gets a lot of steals very quick, very long, active in the defense. And then
super important with the loss of Gabby Marshall. Exactly. She's kind of filled that role.
She has. And, and then freshmen have been inconsistent for sure.
And I should say before, like when I chastised people that were pushing for the freshmen, I did that on here with
yeah,
Aaliyah Guyton when I saw Lucy struggling.
yeah,
So it's a natural tendency to do, but again, credit the coaching staff for seeing this thing through.
mhm,
And yeah, although those freshmen have moments where you're like, wow,
yeah,
and that's good. It speaks well to the future. But right now, the veterans are the
yeah.
ones you got to ride.
Yeah, and because they're the best players on the team right now today, and you're in championship mode,
Yep.
whether it's Big Ten, NCAA,
And a
playoff.
lot of these kids have some pretty good postseason
Yeah,
experience,
yeah,
like lengthy
yeah.
list of postseason accomplishments.
Like winning 3 straight Big Ten championships, going to the championship NCAA championship game twice in a row. When you have Taylor McCabe and Sydney Afalter, who've played major roles in that, Hannah Stolke has played major roles in a couple of those. Kylie Feuerbach in the last year, because 2 years ago she had an ACL. When you have people who've been a part of that, and they know what it takes, Addie O'Grady as well, then you rely on them, and they know it's March and it's time, and it's the way they kind of develop. And but again, kind of with the freshmen though, they've had their freshman moments, they've had their inconsistencies. Aaliyah Guyton has played really well, and other times you're like, she's trying to do too much. She needs to play within her role.
Yep.
And in a lot of cases, that's tough when you're that talented. It's for one, and two, you've been used to being the person on the floor the whole time, and now you're trying to be part of the team. But I would say like Taylor Stremlo and Tegan Malini have played in that type of situation where they've been kind of up and down, and they've come up with minutes. Ava Hayden, if there's one person you kind of feel bad for, is her, because she actually has played well, I thought. And most of the time she's been in there, she's just, since they shortened, changed the rotation and went into more of a, line changes at the post,
Yeah.
she's kind of lost her minutes. But I thought that was a real positive to put all 5 freshmen out there together for an extended period of time in a postseason game, because it enabled them to get experience together, enjoy that experience, put them in a semi non, even though there was some pressure to it, especially later on, but there wasn't a ton of pressure at that moment. Let them get used to each other, have some experience, have some fun, and then take everybody else off the floor, because the tournament really starts tonight, I think, for them.
Yeah, no doubt. Good minutes from Callie Levine last night. Good to see the Solon native get in there and be ready when she was called upon. She hasn't played, boom, put her in there. She was ready, made some nice passes. Good to see. She won a state championship at Solon last year, so she knows about winning as well. Most of these kids do. Michigan State tonight, Scott, they lost at Michigan State in the Big Ten opener. I think it's fair to say, objectively, that this is not the same Iowa team that went to East Lansing back in, what was it, December?
Yeah.
Or was that the end of November? December. That was
December, yeah.
Different team. And I certainly think this is a good position for Iowa. Even though it played last night, as Scott mentioned early on, the minutes were reduced, so I don't see fatigue being an issue tonight. Maybe tomorrow, maybe on Saturday and Sunday, but I think tonight will not be a factor.
Yeah, and again, this was such a long time ago, that they had lost this game, December 15th, Rob. That's almost 3 months ago.
Yeah.
And this is a different team. And obviously at that point, they gave it away. I don't remember a ton about the game because it's so long ago, and I was getting more in mode of playoffs for football but it was, if I recall, they were up like 10 or something on the road and really kind of fell apart and lost by 2. And so this is kind of redemption tour, if you will, for Iowa, because you look at Michigan State being a 6 and Iowa being 11. There's really no difference between those two teams. I mean, they're both 6 seeds, and you want to talk about big picture ramifications. Win this game, it probably gets you a 6 in the NCAA tournament. And if you can get to a 6, then then the board changes dramatically because then you're playing somewhere that's a 3, a Kentucky, an NC State, maybe a TCU or somebody like that, where if you throw Iowa on the floor, you're not going, like you're not going to UConn, you're not going to, so you're not going to Stores, you're not going to South Carolina or UCLA or some of those teams that you've got to play your absolute perfect game to have a chance to win. Instead, you're playing a team that's like you. And with Iowa's experience, you're going to face an excited opponent, but one that's probably got in the back of their mind, that's Iowa. And we know what Iowa has been, even though Caitlin's not there, they got other players who are there. And so you've got that flow there. So that's why tonight's game against Michigan State is so important, because otherwise you're in the 7-8 range, and where this still is a good team, your odds of winning earlier in the tournament are a little bit more difficult.
Yeah. You definitely don't want to get in, where you're playing a 1 or a 2 seed. It's just, you're just, here are the top 8 teams in the net this morning, right? Are these through March 5th? Yes. UConn, South Carolina, Texas, Notre Dame, UCLA, USC, Duke, and TCU. That's your top 8. Not that these will be the seeds, but just kind of a guide. Kansas State is 9, LSU is 10. Please do not send them to LSU. I don't want that. I do not want that.
Which means the NCAA wants that, because they want LSU versus Iowa, because they know they'll get some eyeballs. But
they always say they don't match teams up.
Bull. Yeah. There's a reason why Kansas played North Carolina a few times in the NCAA tournament pretty early, because they want the Roy Williams factor there, and that's the same way here, I think. But if you get take Kansas State, and some of this is. The AP poll is different from this, and we know how conference tournaments will impact some of it. But if you go to Kansas State, who Iowa State just rolled, beat them by 20 or whatever the other day. If you go there and they're a 3 seed and you're a 6, you feel like you got a good chance. You've played them a lot lately, multiple years in a row. You've won some, you've lost some, but you know what they're about. If you
should be able to get some fans to Manhattan.
Yeah, it's close enough that people can hop in the car and drive. If you've got all of that, you feel like, we got a shot. And then if you get to the Sweet 16, to me, and this year, that's gravy. That's like I already think it's been an outstanding year for this team because of where they were a little over a month ago, when they were 2-6 in the Big Ten, and we were wondering, we were talking, who's got the better chance of going to the NCAA tournament, and the men actually,
like we said back then, it'll work itself out. It's worked itself out,
right? And for all of the things and all the pressure that was placed, even on Jan, people were wondering, they made, Beth made the wrong choice, and she's done a hell of a job coaching and keeping this team together, because it's really easy to see where splinters and fractures can happen when you have a player you bring in at that time didn't perform up to expectation. You have a bunch of holdovers who are used to a lot of big moments that they're not playing the way they want to in their roles. And then you have a group of talented freshmen who are wondering, why don't we get a chance to do this? And you have all those factors that if it lets the fester, then this team could implode. Instead, you saw the reverse of it, which is they galvanized, they came together, they played better. Lucy took charge. The role players found their niche and they really enhanced it. And you've seen a together team. And you've got to praise the coaching staff for that. And not just Jan. I mean, obviously having Abby and some others, Abby Emmert Stamp and Raina Harmon and Randy Henderson and the like, really helped put that together. But by the end of the year, I mean, this is a dangerous team. This is a team that, as we know, whether it's in the Big Ten tournament or the NCAA tournament, no team's going to go, sweet, we get to play Iowa. They're going, oh, well, okay, we'll play Iowa. I mean, again, 11, and if you were to just seed it by using the eye test over the last month, at worst, they're 5th. possibly third. Somewhere between 3 and 5 is where they're legitimately should be seated based on their performance. And so, but it's been fun to see, because they're good people genuinely. And I guess I've gotten old and sappy that I like good things happening to good people.
Yes. And I'm with Scott. I think it's already been a successful season when you put it in the context of what you lost from last year's team, including a Hall of Fame coach, and what they've been able to do this year to get to 20 wins again, play well at the end of the year and figure it out with a lot of new pieces. If they lose tonight and they lose their first NCAA tournament game, I know it'll be disappointed, and I know people will be fired up and critical and be personal about it. But if you just step back and consider the circumstances, it's been a successful season in my mind. And flipping over to the men's side, Scott, Michigan State, it's a Michigan State night.
Yeah.
It's a Spartan Hawkeye evening.
It's a Sparty party.
Yeah. And another Hall of Fame coach, Tom Izzo, coming to Carver Hawkeye Arena again. He's always entertaining to watch on the sideline and listen when I'm I won't be there tonight because I'm going away, but being on the baseline and listening to the student section give it to Izzo, telling him to get off the court is always a fun time at Carver Hawkeye Arena. Hopefully folks show up, give Iowa a little bit of a home court advantage. Senior night, Peyton Sanford, I'm not sure what else you could have asked from him during his Iowa career. Kids left it all out there, as has, Drew Thelwell came in here, did what he could do. Evan Bruns has been, more than you could have asked for, stepping in and helping out without Owen Freeman. So a lot of reasons to be there tonight and give this team a little bit of a home court advantage that it hasn't had this season. And you know what, Scott? It's going to need it. Michigan State, 8th in the country and playing for an outright Big Ten championship tonight. You can ruin Michigan State's celebration tonight. That should be all the motivation you need. Now the question is, do you have the horses to win the game?
Yeah, that's the biggest question of all. You have motivation if you want it, if you want to take it there. But Iowa won the last meeting between these two teams like a year ago, and for a while it was so one-sided between Izzo and Fran. It was like they were the bully and Iowa was the bullied. And, for about a 5 or 6 year period there in Fran's early going. And then Iowa has done a nice job of kind of evening it out, had what gave Tom Izzo his worst loss and, in Big Ten losses for sure at home a few years ago when they had Luka Garza and that. But this is, this is a different year and a different situation. And they clinched a share of the title last night when Michigan State lost. Now they're going to come to Iowa City with a chance to clinch it outright, and they're going to be motivated to do that. No question at all. I mean, that's a heck of an accomplishment. And Tom Izzo, he's tied Bobby Knight and another guy. I don't even know his name. I'd have to look it up. But for his 11th Big Ten championship, that's pretty damn. I mean, that's not only Hall of Fame worthy. That's he's the winningest coach in Big Ten history. So he's going to want to do all of that at Iowa. It's senior night. There's a lot of external things going on too that we can talk about. But I think overall, what you want is you want to put forth a quality effort and compete and give yourself a chance to win and give yourself a chance to really do yourselves right when it comes on the team. And
I think you could say, when you give credit to Jan and her staff for keeping that team together. I think the coaching staff and the players for Iowa men's basketball should be given credit too. They've been hit with a lot of gut punches this year, injury-wise, things like that. But they've competed, as you said. They've come out and they may have lost, but it wasn't because of effort. Right. And that's what you worry about with this stuff. The whole thing just falling apart. So, it is what it is. We all know that change is coming in some way, shape, or form. It has to. But for this team, and we'll get into the future in a second, they are a game behind now, the pack of teams at 7 wins. Iowa has 6 conference wins to get into the Big Ten tournament. So there's implications for this game as well tonight in regards to that. And then also playing at Nebraska on Sunday, where it could be a play-in game.
It is
basically.
a play-in game. It is a play-in game.
No matter what else happens?
No matter what else happens, because the teams behind him, Penn State and Washington, they're basically out right now. The third team out, and there's only 3 that get left out. It could come down between Iowa and Nebraska, and Iowa would then tie Nebraska in the standings if it wins it at Nebraska, and it has the sweep, so it earns that opportunity there. Now, if it gets into a 3-way tie, I would have to look at it. But if it comes,
because you got Northwestern, USC, and Minnesota and Rutgers are all in there too at 7 and 12. I don't know what all the schedules are for the other teams, but I think it's probably Iowa's got to win these 2.
I would say if Iowa could beat Nebraska, and then you start to stack them up against the others. First of all, they're 2-0 against Nebraska. So they're ahead of Nebraska, and Nebraska might be then out. And then you look at, they've split with Northwestern, lost to Minnesota and USC, beat Rutgers. Yeah. So they've got enough wins in there. You'd think that they kind of nudge their way in, whether they're 15, 14, that doesn't matter. But either way, they got to get a win. They can't, if they lose both, they're done. And as they sit right now, they still have a winning record overall. And what does that mean? Not much, obviously, but it's still it's something. It's something you can point at. You could say this is the worst year Iowa's had since 2018, and yet you still have a winning record. That's something you can say. That that's like being 6-6 in football, and 3-6 in the Big Ten, but hey, at least you got a winning record, or you didn't have a losing record. I think that's the same way here. You're right that they should be commended for not falling apart. It would have been easy because they are statistically in rough sledding in some areas, and going on the road, it's in the Big Ten, even if with a good team, it's not easy. Going like Illinois, Iowa was, I could have predicted that shit. I could predict that every year. The only time they win is like with miracle comebacks over there. And, but they have competed. They've won games. They've played well other times. This one is going to be monumental. It's going to be a tough task. But Sunday, that's when it all comes together, because they had a really good win against Nebraska. Overtime, it was a great comeback. Peyton Sanford and Josh Dix really came back hard. And you're going to get that kind of effort from Nebraska because they're actually on the NCAA tournament bubble. So, which would be weird if to be on the NCAA tournament bubble and the Big Ten tournament bubble. But
that is a commentary on where we are on the landscape of college athletics.
I know you got a gigantic conference, and you've got a tournament. Well, just wait till it goes to 76 teams, and then got that too. But
I would say, Scott, that you could look at it and say, is it better for Iowa to have the season end on Sunday in terms of the future of the program? Because you got it, you get down to it then it's decision time in all regards. But I would not take that approach personally. From what Scott said earlier, I know Peyton Sanford, I know the guys on that team. I want them to play as long as they can play. I really do. I want, if they could make a run in the Big Ten, not even win it, but win a game or 2 in the Big Ten tournament, feel good about yourself going out. That's what I'm rooting for. The reality is, we've talked about it before. Something has to change here. I'll reiterate what I've said on this podcast probably ad nauseum, and people are sick of me saying it. I do not think that Fran deserves to be fired based on performance, on merit. However, something needs to be addressed with this program because the people aren't showing up to the games. There's apathy. It runs deep. And it's more than just Fran. It's the program itself. It's the arena. It's community engagement, fan engagement, um, NIL money. I mean, it's deep. There's a lot more to it. So there's a lot to it. So that gives you, when you look at it and say, well, if the season ended Sunday, you could get to work on all that stuff. Beth's working on it behind the scenes. There's no doubt in my mind she's got to figure this out. Fran said the other day that he wants to come back. At that point, not that that's revelation for Beth. She probably has had that discussion. You have a buyout. So these are the decisions that have to be made here. I'm of the belief that you sit down with Fran and ask him what he thinks can be done to fix it. Listen to what he says, what ideas he has. And this may have happened. Beth says to him, I need you to do this. He says, I can do that. That's the only way. And even if you do that, how are you going to explain to fans that you're moving forward with what they've already checked out on? So that's kind of where we are. That's where I am on this. I'm glad I don't have to make the decision. It's your all-time winningest coach. As I've said before, his son is in what seems like a pretty serious relationship with your most famous athlete. People dismiss things like that, but all of those relationships are important here. It's a very, very tough needle to thread here, Scott. I'm interested to see how it plays out.
Yeah, this is not an easy cut and dry decision because I'm with you when it comes to actual on-court performance. He is not. I classified it even before the season. I was talking to somebody on our staff, and I said it. In some ways, it's the high price of mediocrity, and Iowa basketball kind of fits in that, and a lot of other programs do too. And that is good enough to where you can't really justify letting somebody go like Fran, but not good enough to where you're reaching these high destinations. And because in 10 years, it's like, we're going to have a celebration of this team or that team. I mean, the last team that you're worthy of celebrating is a Sweet 16 team in 1999, so even, you've had NCAA, so I think what you're looking at is you got to bring some sort of big memories, and Iowa basketball hasn't done that. You really lost a couple of generations of fans. I mean, they're still fans, but they're not as passionate as they once were. But so Fran on the floor, to me, has earned the right to have a bad season. And the absolute dumbest thing that I hear from people, and I dismiss anything they say when they say this, is like, it's year 15, he shouldn't be doing this. You know what? You play in the Big Ten Conference. Everybody has a bad year. And since 2013, Fran and Tom Izzo are the only two programs to have one losing season or less. That now becomes two this year. But teams strike out. Teams have injuries. Teams play a tough schedule. Teams, they don't pan out when it comes to recruits. Just everything happens. And if he finishes with a winning record, let's say they split this weekend, they lose tonight, they go to Nebraska and win, then they go to the Big Ten tournament and maybe they win a game, and then they lose. They decide to shut it down. They're not going to go to the Las Vegas Crown tournament or whatever. But then they're 17-16, and it's like they had a bad year, but they still had a winning record. Now they played a really bad non-conference schedule, so that's part of it. But still, you figure that all out and go, it could be worse. Now, and we've seen worse at Iowa. We saw worse in his predecessor, but that should never preclude them from making a change either. And
I'm not down with the "be careful what you wish for" crowd either.
Yeah.
That to me is not a way you approach this.
That's a football conversation to me. And that was a basketball conversation 25 years ago. That's not a basketball conversation today, because all you have to do is look 2 hours west. They were 2-22 and 0-18 during the COVID year, and they went and hired TJ Otzelberg, and they made the change, and he's been in 2 of the last 3 Sweet 16s. That's pretty damn good. And, so but I think, you do have this, he's their winningest coach. What has he done to get fired? Not much. I mean, you could say we want more. Well, then other people say, well, what are your facilities like? What's your recruiting base like? What's your NIL like? Well, you haven't done anything to deserve more. You don't have the infrastructure in place to deserve more than what you've already gotten from Fran. But then you look at the external factor, which is how do fans feel about the program? And there's indifference, there's apathy, that they don't really care. They don't really talk about it. And that's anecdotal, but it's true. You look at the butts in the seats. I mean, I keep researching all these past years and look at what was the attendance like? And, because they stopped keeping track when you go back to like 1970 and you go back into the 60s, I still have not found a year where they averaged less attendance than where they're at right now. And that's, barely over 9,000 paid. And then you look and say, what's the scans like? And that's where it's catastrophic. When your arena is about 66% filled, and then out of that 66%, 40% of those don't even show up. That tells you you've got a big problem. And this is the Big Ten. It's a big business. And so you've got to look at how do people embrace your product. Where Fran comes in, and this is the most important factor, is if he wants to stay, it's got to be more than just coach the team I got on the floor and that's it. You've got to bring people together. You've got to talk to, he doesn't do podcasts, in Iowa. He doesn't go on TV shows. He doesn't, really rarely engages in one-on-one interviews and has reporters he doesn't like and won't communicate with them. And so you have all of that needs to end. You've got to put yourself out there. And if you've got grievances, you've got to put them in the closet, man. You got to shut it down. You can bitch about it behind the scenes, but you can't make it part of your daily routine. And then you've got to engage the fan base. And that's how you go on Des Moines radio or, Hawk Central podcast, or hell, this one for that matter, or on Iowa Live. And you talk about your team, your program, and your vision for how you can get better. You've got to do that. And then you've got to meet the fans where they are, because they're not coming to you anymore. You've got to go to them. And that's summer events, that's spring events. That's not just going to the I Club, giving a speech, and then, leaving the arena and going to have a dinner somewhere else, which is what he's done before. So you've got to, and is he willing to do that? He has seemingly been unwilling to do that in the past. And he knows the path that this has gone down, and he has chosen not to do it. If he's willing to do that, then this decision is very, very, even more difficult than we can imagine. If he's not, if he's like, look, I just want to coach basketball, that's what I'm here for, then I think your decision is, well, we're going to base it on the business factor, and that's outranks basketball, because we can bring in a basketball coach. If you bring in Darian DeVries, are they going to be any worse? Are they going to be any better? Well, we'll take that chance. So I don't know. I said a lot there, Rob, but I do think it's more than what's going on the floor. It just has to be.
Yeah, and we've talked about this a lot, and about not playing the in-state games and no more primetime league and all the connections to the community and the fan base that have gone away, the shirts and skins, the Midnight Madness, all the things that people really got into. I mean, they do the thing in the fall downtown, which is great. They need to do more of that. And Scott and I have talked about, I don't know, barnstorming tour is the right word, but play some exhibition games, get some alumni in certain areas to come out and play some games. Adam Haluska, I'm sure he could still make a three-pointer. Do some fun things to build things back up and get people engaged. It can be done. And I'm with you. I think you go to Fran if you're Beth and you present these things. And if he refuses, you got to say, can we just go in status quo next year where we are right now? No. What's going to change? What's going to bring people back to the seat? You have to address the issue. You can't ignore it anymore. And in conjunction with that, Fran can come back and say, okay, fine, I'll do that. What are we going to get in NIL? Can we be competitive What can we do with the arena? What can the university do? I'm going to do my part.
Yeah.
What is the university going to do to help this program be able to measure up to the competition from an NIL standpoint, from a facility standpoint, all of those things? This thing needs to be fixed, Scott, and it's big. There's a lot of shit here.
And you know what? This is if you're Beth, this is your opportunity to do something. You know, if we've talked chicken or the egg, you know, Tiger Hawk on the water tower when it comes to seating the students around the arena and blah blah blah. Looking at the butts in the seats now, just effing do it.
Yeah.
You know, that now is the chance. It's like people aren't coming. You're getting a third of the fan base here. They're not coming. We're going to do it now.
Yep.
You know, and we're going to talk to the donors, the ones who come and show up. We'll figure something out with them. They're loyal. We'll try to keep them in certain areas, but damn it, it's time. We got to do this now. We have the opportunity to, because when you've sunk this low,
Yep,
you've got to be radical, and so do it for next year. Get it done, and figure out the little pieces as they come, and then you know, and that goes hand in hand. If it's, you know, it's fun stuff. You can have NIL. You've got to generate it too through goodwill, which is, you know what, we're going to have alumni night and try to work out an agreement, whether it's at Carver or it's in Coralville at the new arena or it's in Cedar Rapids or Des Moines, whatever. And we're going to have alumni night, and we're going to have a pig contest or a horse shooting contest. And we're going to have Kent McCausland there. And we're going to have Adam Hluska there. And we're going to have, well, Peyton probably not now, Matt Gatens and Bryce Sanford.
Do it in the summer. Have Luca back. Have Keegan and Chris back. I mean, yeah, let's get down and, you know, get people that have memories of this program and its players, and let's get everybody engaged again. Let's get everybody rowing in the same direction.
You know, have an Iowa basketball celebration. Even Bobby Hansen thrown out there, but have a and this is, you know, you should have those types of nights anyway for the general fan base. And this goes straight to NIL. This doesn't go to, you know, or even whether it's the Swarm or internally, whatever. That's those events. If you do that like 4 times in the summer around the state, or late spring, early summer, that goes to the players. Then you have like a black tie type of high money celebration in some respects, you know, or combine it where we're going to have a celebration of Iowa basketball at Carver Hawkeye Arena, where you bring in the great teams of the past, and you have Steve Waite talk about his 3-point play that beat Georgetown in 1980. You know, have Kevin Gamble talk about his 3-pointer to beat Oklahoma in overtime in 87. You know, AC Earl and Kenyon Murray, the Street family. You know, you do this, and people pay to come in there. Then you also have on the side a dinner that's going to be, you know, this is where you get the high rollers and auction items. You can do all these things. And this is what the infrastructure, what they need to do to generate interest, because the Iowa fans I know in our age group in the 50s that grew up in the 80s here remember Ronnie Lester, and remember, you know, the late great Roy Marble and Ed Horton and all that. They remember all of that stuff. Bring Tom Davis back. BJ. Oh yeah, he's probably the most famous. You know, he still looks like he's, you know, he finally looks 31. You know,
and he comes back. I mean, I think he would be willing to do that and support the program.
So celebrate your history and help it to spur more tradition. If you can do all of that, and Fran has done a really good job, I think, in outreach for the people close to the program, you know, the former players and the really heavy donors who love Iowa basketball, you know, like the Street family or Gasser and all those people. But the people outside of that circle, he's not been very good with. He just hasn't. You've got to find ways to manufacture that. And if he's willing to do it, you know, and he has a plan for doing it, and he's willing to put aside his pettiness with certain people and focus on selling the program as much as coaching the program, Yeah, I could see him bringing him back one more year. I would extend him, but not extend the buyout. I could just to say, we're going to bring back Fran. We believe in Fran. Here's an extra year onto his contract. Buyout's not going to change. You can't do that because you're giving him, you're extending him an olive branch. If he's not willing to do that, if he's saying, look, I'm a basketball coach. You guys are marketing people. You need to figure this out. And I just want to bring a team that we're all proud of. We can coach and do all that. Then I think you've got to say, you know what, this is a business too. And we got to make a business decision. And we can bring somebody in here who's going to invigorate the fan base. We'll take the risk on what it's going to do on the floor, because over the last 25 years, there have been a few peaks, but there's mostly been flat lines. It's mostly been plateaus, and you got to do more than that.
Yes. And we're inching closer to decisions and how this thing is going to play out. We've talked about it most of the winter, and just kind of, as Scott said earlier in the year in December, we were like, which one of these teams, the men or the women, are going to be able to gel and come together and figure it out. And the women have done it. The men have had circumstances with injuries, but it is what it is. And there's a difference in terms of following and support and engagement with the women's program compared to the men's. Again, there's some apples to oranges there just because of recent history and having a beyond generational type talent and star in the making, and that helps. But the men's basketball, Beth, those guys, they can't look at it and say, well, we're getting the support from the women's program. We're getting it for wrestling. We're getting it for football. We need NIL money. We get it. We get the people we need. We get the people we want. Lucy Olson and Mark Kanowski and all that. We're getting people that we want. Don't think about that if you're looking at the men's program. Grassroots, as Scott and I are saying, get down there, get into the dirt, get your hands dirty, get out, barnstorm, auctions, dinners, alumni events, engagement. You gotta get people back. And whoever is on board with doing that stays and continue, and we do it together. Whoever doesn't see that vision, we got to move on. It's business.
Yeah, exactly. And because, there are people, like Matt Gatens, to me, is a great ambassador for Iowa men's basketball, for Iowa athletics. And, I feel so bad for him because, his first couple of years with Licklider, and then he kind of ushered in the new era. But he's as Hawkeye at heart as anybody in this state, certainly related to the program, because he played it, he lived it, and he coaches it now. And he'd be all in on all of this. He always is. No matter, and he would be a guy that if they did decide to go in a new direction, the new coach would be very, very smart to keep him, because it always seems to happen. And if it's, I would say, if it's like, say, DeVries or Ben McCollum, that I feel reasonably sure that would be the case. But that, I think that this is a different animal. This is a different situation than the others face. And yes, women had, a generational talent, but the connection beyond that generational talent with the community, with the state, Jan always told me that, Lisa Bluter everybody feels like in the state of Iowa feels like they have a cup of coffee with Lisa Bluter, and the outreach that they did in Iowa City that very few people know about. The small groups, and I'm talking moms and kids, last summer I went out there. I don't even know what I was doing. I was going out there just to talk to somebody in probably the SID's office. And I walk in and there's Jan as the head coach leading a group of probably 6 to 8 women and their kids, just kind of giving them a tour. And it's like, those are the things that people remember. And the women who were on the team last year and this year, but people know them by their first names, Molly, and who you're talking about, Gabby and Kate Martin, and they're larger than life because they felt like, to a lot of these people, they were like the neighbor kids that grew up. You watched them grow up and they babysat your kids or something. And, it's like small town Iowa state team goes to state on a much more macro level. And that's not even counting the greatest player of all time. That's counting people who buy those shirts and stuff from Ray Gun. The men's program has missed that connection because Peyton Sanford would fit that. Josh Dix would fit that description too. They're from the state of Iowa. They are as indelible there as anybody. And that's sad. And I think they would do that. I think they would go out and do all those things to make themselves, an Owen Freeman who's not from Iowa, but he's from the Midwest. It's going to take, steps forward to build that bridge back. And it's possible. It's not impossible. It's not so far gone that it's never going to come back again. Because, to look across the state, and I know people don't want to, but I was there the other night. I do the decibel readings. The loudest decibel reading I've ever had happened the other night. And that was Iowa State and BYU, 120 decibels. It got up for a three-pointer in the second half late for Iowa State when they were on their massive comeback. And so, but I look at the people there, how engaged they are. That's the same fan base basically as you got in Iowa City, just wearing a different color.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things that Jamie Pollard has done, and I'm writing about this later on, but in the very beginning, they had a ton of like golf outings in the summer. Like it's like 30 or 40 golf outings. And, and we can't send our coaches out on all these things. And he goes, and what's the dynamic there? 40 to 60-year-old men. And they're great. We need them, but that's not going to do anything for us. So he canceled all of them and went on a caravan. And they load up a Cyclone bus, and then they hit like 7 or 8 spots in Iowa. And then they'll go and, like Lindale Mall, they would close off the parking lot, or they go down and they'd have bouncy houses for the kids. And it was just a celebration. And the coaches, Matt Campbell, now I think they go to maybe one of the hotels in Marriott or something in Blair's Ferry, but, there's several hundred people there. If you want an autograph from any of them, you get it. If you want to talk to them, you get it. If you want to see them, they'll talk to you, all these things. And it's an engagement thing. And people bring, they have to sign. But it's been a 20-year play for them.
Yeah.
Because remember what they were 20 years ago. They were good in basketball. Well, not then, but, before that. But the rest of it was pretty stale. And they've reinvigorated that base. And I'm not saying Iowa should do the same thing, because you probably don't want to do the same thing as Iowa State, just out of dynamics of
Yeah.
But they did it the right way, and they generated a lot of interest because they went to the fans.
Yep.
Then their fans reciprocated. And when they needed them after, realignment stuff and getting Matt Campbell and keeping Matt Campbell and all that, they're there for them. They support them because of that. And I think that's the same way here, that Iowa traditionally has been a little bit more upper crest, and we're Iowa. We can do, we have a game today. Come to our game. They can't do it that way anymore. It just doesn't work.
No, there are too many other forms of entertainment and competition for your entertainment dollars. So you have to, just like you talk about branding and social media and pushing your product, Iowa needs to do that with men's basketball. We'll see what happens here coming down to the end of the regular season. Michigan State tonight, senior night at home, at Nebraska on Sunday. And we'll talk plenty more about basketball moving forward here. Let's take a break, and we'll come back and talk about football. Support for the podcast comes from Systems Unlimited, celebrating 50 years of providing services to people living with disabilities and mental health needs throughout East Central Iowa. A list of their services and upcoming events can be found at sui.org. That is sui.org. We'll hear from a few more sponsors. Scott and I will be back on the other side. Hang tight. Back on the Hotspot podcast to let you know that switching is easy. We do it all the time. We switch on the lights. We switch TV channels. Some of us switch partners while square dancing. Well, that's a stretch, but what's not a stretch is how you can switch and save with State Farm. In fact, State Farm agent Chad Birch right here in Iowa can switch you over so you can start saving today. Chad and his team are ready to welcome you to the State Farm neighborhood. With Chad Birch, it's easy to switch and save. Just give him a call. When you want the real deal, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Black Angel Restaurant, downtown Iowa City. Perez Brothers owned and operated, formerly of El Banditos, Perez Tacos. Excellent food, live music on the weekends. Check it out. Black Angel Restaurant, downtown Iowa City. We had some coaching changes, or a coaching change, I guess, at Iowa. One coming in, one leaving. Scott Liddell Betts headed off to the New York Giants, where he'll work with James and Stephen Ferentz and Coach Tyrone Tracy. It's like a reunion in North Jersey, because it's not really in New York, even though it's the New York Giants. But Scott had a chance to talk to Liddell last week, so he has some insight on what went into that decision. And then in conjunction with that, or I guess separately from that, because they still need a running backs coach, they hired an analyst, Warren Ruggiero, formerly of Wake Forest, offensive coordinator there the last 11 years. He has been hired as an analyst, and interesting. He has some interesting offensive ideas and things that he did at Wake Forest that were very successful. We can jump into that a little bit, but let's start first with the Liddell Betts part of this equation, Scott. Why he's moving on, and what Iowa needs to do to replace him. And also you got some insight on the guys coming back too.
Yeah. We had a really long, great conversation. None of it, I'm not writing any of it. It was just more, and this happens a lot. It's not really transactional when you're there. You meet with a lot of different people just to have, talks. A lot of times it's with beverages, and in this case, it was in the middle of the day in a Starbucks instead of what we've seen, later in the day, which unfortunately one of those nights got really, 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 really late. But with Liddell, this all happened very quickly. He had teams reach out to him. There was some discussion with the Bears, but the Giants, what he kind of told me was that one of the coaches reached out to him on a day, and I think he said it was it might have been Valentine's Day or something, and he was like, he was with his wife or something. He was like, well, I'll call him back later, and then the next day he gets a call from Brian Daboll from the Giants, and he's like,
he's the head coach of the Giants, for those that don't know.
Right. And then Liddell's like, oh crap, I forgot to call your guy back, because he thought it was about Caleb, if they had any interest there. And he's like, no, actually it's about you. We've got an opening here. We're wanting to know if you'd be interested. And then all of a sudden he goes, well, yeah, I'd like to talk to you about this, but call Kirk first, because there's a protocol there. And Liddell is close to Kirk, and he wants to do things the right way for Kirk, with Kirk, about this. And so Brian's like, sure, let me call him. Called him. Kirk then called Liddell to say, hey, the Giants are interested in you, or what do you think, that sort of thing. And he's like, well, I'd like to talk to him about it. And it happened very quickly to where originally their plan was, well, they're going to meet during the combine and kind of have an interview. And then Brian Daboll decided, no, let's escalate this and put him on a plane to Jersey as quickly as possible after a Zoom meeting. And ultimately, had a job offer while he was getting ready to get on the plane, or he was right sitting before the door was shut. And he's like, okay, let me go talk to my wife about this first and finalize that before I say yes. And he said he talked to Kirk pretty much every day about it, and kind of would ask him his opinion. Is he saying this? And Kirk's like, oh yeah, they're very, very interested in you. This isn't just you're one of a immense number of candidates. You're one that they're really talking to. And it was that he got offered it on that Sunday of a week and a half ago, and accepted it. after he got home, and then pretty much headed to the combine. He was there all week, and he was kind of joking. I saw him, he had like a navy blue sweatshirt on, and I'm like, so no Giants gear? He goes, I haven't had a chance to get any yet. So, and he was even saying, he said that was one of the questions for Brian Daboll, which was, man, what do I even wear? And and he goes, I'll just bring something blue and you're all right, because he didn't have anything. And some other things that were kind of fascinating that I learned about it was, um, of all people who knew about it before he did, LaShawn Williams, former Iowa running back who's at Kansas. And part of that is that LaShawn had a conversation with Tyrone Tracy, and that they had a conversation with Tyrone Tracy about Liddell, because they were there together for a year when Tyrone was a receiver, and Tyrone was like, yeah, he's really good. You should really look at him. And then he was having like a text conversation with LaShawn and mentioned it to him. So LaShawn and Liddell, still communicate, because even though they leave, it's not like they're completely severed ties forever. They're and texted him or something, and he's like, hey, congrats on the Giants gig. And he's like, how did you know? And he's like, well, Tyrone told me, and all this stuff. So, and he's like, I didn't even tell anybody by then, and so and here's another funny part was, I brought it up to him about Tyrone, and he's like, yeah, I forgot I'm going to be working with him. And I'm like, do you have his number? He goes, and I go, he's from Indianapolis. I go, you going to go down and see him down at Decatur Central or whatever? And he's like, he goes, no, I forgot about that too. And I'm like, well, do you have his number? No. And I'm like, here it is. I still had it on my phone from, going over there and visiting Tyrone. So I'm like making inroads with former Iowa players, the former Iowa coaches who are now with the Giants and stuff. So, but Liddell's excited for the opportunity. He's going to do an outstanding job at the next level. He did a great job at Iowa in a very short period of time. I mean, you think about the Derek Foster did a good job too. He's still in the NFL, but he stabilized it. He did a lot of, I mean, when you talk about beyond football, you remember the timing and when he came in, it was really important and impactful for the program to bring back a former player, an African-American former player, in light of what they went through in 2020, and then the way he transformed the room to be able to, first he tried to recruit Caleb Johnson, then he committed to Cal, then he re-recruits Caleb, brings him in, emphasizes to him over and over and over again, this is what you need to do to be good, finally connects at the right time, and he has an All-American season. And then you look at the players who remain there. He is really, really high on Kamari and TJ Washington. He thinks and Jazz too, he's said good things about him, but particularly he thinks Kamari could have a breakout season, and he's over 200 pounds and looks really good. So, and he was a guy that was going to go to Florida Atlantic. TJ Washington was going to go to Purdue until Jeff Brom left. Jazz, I can't remember all of his options, but and Kamari was a guy that he had to kind of sell everybody on because they lost Kendrick Raphael. I don't know if you remember him, but he was like a 4-star, and he
went to NC State, I believe, right?
Yeah, but he was like, yeah, I like this guy a lot. And we saw him, last year he really took steps forward, and I think this could be another big year for him. So it leaves a sizable opening, not one that they can't fill, but when you lose good people, then it does bring up a little bit of a question mark.
Yeah, we'll see which direction they go with that. If they go for a former player, somebody that, Kirk has shown he will think outside of the box. I mean, he hired John Budmeyer as his wide receiver coach last year. So it's not, I wouldn't get boxed in by an idea of who might fill that. Warren Ruggiero, Scott, what will be his responsibilities? Again, John Budmeyer was an analyst back before he became the wide receiver coach. So I was used to having somebody in there and incorporating him into the operation. It's just there are different people, and Kirk's still in the operation, but it's Lester and Ruggiero now instead of Budmeyer and Brian. So we'll see how this threesome comes together and how their ideas work together. Because you just never know.
Yeah. The interesting thing is, if you would have thought back a couple of years ago when Brian was still the OC, analysts couldn't do any on-field work then. Now
Yeah.
they can. Now they're basically a coach. You can have as many as you want. In fact, every single day, I kind of laugh about it. Illinois announces a new coach, and today it was James White, the former running back at Wisconsin, the Brett coach, and they have like 20 assistant coaches. Well, Kirk's not going to go like that. It's not going to be the NFL, and plus, a lot of those assistant position coaches aren't paid very much there, but still, you're still getting guys there. This was one that they advertised for back in December. It was kind of on the NCAA website. So they knew that this is what they wanted, and then they went about it methodically. To get Warren Ruggiero, he was a longtime offensive coordinator at Wake Forest. Their 2011 season was off the charts. I mean, they went to the ACC championship. They won 11 games. They averaged 41 points a game. He teaches kind of a slow mesh at times. It's radically different than what we've seen at Iowa, but he can really get into the think tank with Tim Lester and come up with, different schemes, different set of eyes, not only on yourself, but scouting the opponent. It's really a strong hire. It's probably one that it seems for people who are used to Iowa doing certain things, it's really out of the box. It's really not one that you would expect because his offense is so radically different than what Iowa's had in the past. But then again, you're trying to marry certain elements together. And I think if you have somebody who's had this much offensive success with a Tim Lester, who I thought had a really good first year, and you bring in a quarterback like Mark Gronowski, who's had a lot of success, who's still recovering from, labrum surgery. You bring all these elements together, and now they have the time to incorporate it all instead of last year was drinking from a fire hose. I'm anxious to see how this comes together. I think it could really work. It'd be really interesting, and it also shows more of an evolution with Kirk Ferentz than I think people think, which is, he was so stodgy in his defense of Brian, and it always seemed like things had to be this way. Well, he's shown that things can happen in multiple different ways to be effective.
Yes, and as Scott said, Warren Ruggiero has had success in the passing game and throwing the football. And in case you didn't know this, Iowa needs some help in that area. That's what Mark Gronowski's here for. Hopefully, Warren Ruggiero can supplement that as well, and everybody can work together and share ideas. We saw with Tim Lester, came in here last year, a little bit handcuffed with certain components of the offense, but twofold. He figured out that the middle zone would work, and it did, and Kirk allowed him to do that. Those are positive signs moving forward, as Scott said, that Kirk may be a little bit more willing to go away from what he's most comfortable with. And I'm interested. I'm interested to see what mainly Lester and Ruggiero, but then with Kirk kind of involved in guiding that, what they can do, because I think they have some receivers that could take the next step. They've got some young tight ends, as Scott talked about, the running backs, good talent coming back on the offensive line, some holes you have to fill, but there's potential here. You have to feel better about where things are at this time now than where they were a year ago at this time.
Yeah, I do for sure. I mean, I think that they've taken steps in the right direction. And, for as much of a hard time, I guess, that, Kirk deserves in some ways for, whether it's the Brian situation or not, he's taking elements and he's taking steps in this different direction. And I think it's really, important. And you talk about the offense, and there are certain aspects that he's never going to shy away from. Iowa will run the football. They will attempt to run the football, but Tim Lester also showed we can still run the football. We can still block it with the same techniques that you have, just schematically change it.
Yep.
And it worked. And that's what, with the mid zone run, with Caleb Johnson, it was there, and it was so much easier or better for the guards, for instance, to reach their aiming points at the second level without relying solely on outside zone, because they couldn't do it as well, because the people could spot it quicker, they get to the opening quicker, and beat them to the punch. This way, they can't beat them to the punch; they face them, and then that's when they're able to bury them as often as they did, and they did a lot last year. Ruggiero, if it's a passing schematic-ish things you could spot and see, it could be just a couple of elements per game.
Just alterations, man. Yeah. They're not wholesale changes.
Yeah.
Leicester, they were alterations to what was being done that worked.
Yeah.
And maybe Ruggiero can come in, make alterations to the passing game. It's not like they're not going to throw the ball to the tight end anymore.
Yeah. Oh, I know. And let's face it, if that was his suggestion, Kirk would have said,
interview's over.
Yeah. Because, they already gave up fullback. He's not giving up.
Yeah.
And of course, one of the things I wrote out of Indianapolis is which school is tight end you, and Iowa is, over the last 10 years, especially Iowa's number 1, 2, and 3, basically. But, and over 25, they're probably the second best. So 25 years, they've been the second best program in developing tight ends. Last 10 years, easily number 1. I think Iowa wants to stick with that, and it makes sense. But as we said, the slow mesh is interesting to me because it is so unlike Iowa. It is not, you're basically walling people at the line of scrimmage instead of firing out. You've got, a slow start, and for some players you could probably do it, and other players they can't. But it remains to be seen. Mark Groganowski is more adaptable. He can play different ways. And I assume Hank Brown probably could too. Brendan Sullivan definitely can. So there's a lot of different elements in play here. I'm anxious to see how it all comes together, because I do think for the first time in a while that they've got the guts of a pretty good offense. Obviously I think highly of Mark Groganowski. He was really good at South Dakota State. They've got 3 of the better returning linemen in the Big Ten coming back. You've got young guys that you feel good about, that you feel like can maybe make that next step. And then at receiver, it was a struggle last year, but they had strides. They improved, and you figure that at least one or maybe 2 of them are going to take that step forward. I thought Bowie had a nice year. Reese Vanderzee, before he got hurt, was doing well. Seth Anderson, you're just okay. Can you not get injured once? Jacob Gill, it was probably the most consistent receiver. Sam Phillips comes in from Chattanooga, and you expect him to be a high-level performer. How do they figure in with Caden Weegan this year? Can TJ Washington, who Liddell was very, very high on, is kind of a versatile threat, Swiss Army knife. How does he figure in? Dayton Howard. So they've got guys with talent that now have a year of growth in the system. And so you think they might be able to take another step. Are they going to be great? I don't know about that, but I think that they can be better than they've been since probably Amir and Brandon Smith were there, and and what they should have been the next year when they had some other good pieces. Keegan Johnson and Charlie Jones. They should have been better that year, maybe with a better design. And but anyway, I feel positive that this offense is moving in the right direction, and that's something you kind of wished for them for a while, but now I actually kind of believe it.
Yeah, you can see a path to success here, and you're going to need more, most likely, if you look at it on paper, from your offense in complementary football next year because of what you lose on defense. Mm-hmm. So that's just kind of the race you run, right? You got to figure out where your strengths are and what you need from each phase to make it work, and that's the process right now. We'll have spring football soon for them to get their, the coaches to start being able to work with these guys and start to sift through what they have and all those things, and fold Warren Ruggiero in, and Lester's got, a year under his belt. He's more comfortable. So we'll see how that all comes together. Some of the guys they're replacing, Scott, happy to see kind of Colby. I've followed his covered his recruitment, went and saw him play at West High his senior year. And it's always fun to see guys like that do well. And you're watching him run the 40 on TV, a big dude with a mullet. running down the runway.
Yeah.
It's good to see him do well. I'm disappointed for Mason Richmond not getting a chance to do that, but I feel like he's going to be able to show at Pro Day that he deserves a chance and will get a chance. But I thought overall, in addition to Colby, a pretty good week for the Iowa guys. I think sometimes you get hung up on those 40 times for Caleb Johnson's, things like that. But if you dig a little deeper with all of the guys, I think they kind of put their best foot forward.
Yeah, that's the interesting factor is of in all this, Rob, is their expectation. Sometimes you judge them where they shouldn't be judged.
Yeah.
And like, let's take Jay Higgins, for instance.
Yep.
People started going, oh, he only ran a 4.82. He was last in his position group. Well, I think you pointed it out. That was the same time Josie Jewell ran.
Yeah.
Josie Jewell's been a starter now for 7 years ish or whatever. And 4.82 isn't that bad for an inside linebacker. Now, what else does he bring? Well, in his 3-cone, he won it. He had the best 3-cone. That shows more change of direction. And that's what linebackers have to do. When they're in the box, they've got to move and stuff. So, okay, he's not going to be able to catch Caleb Johnson from behind. Oh well. That's why you have defensive backs are faster. But all the other intangibles are off the charts. And one thing he told me that I thought was really interesting was Josie Jewell is the one that is kind of their instruction video guy, because he, and he, Jay and Josie to me were a lot alike, different personalities, of course.
Yeah.
But stylistically, they're different builds, but the way they play, the leadership they displayed, the effectiveness, the intensity, all of that, that they're real common. And of course, they're both first team All-Americans. So I think that in itself, it tells me that, Jay is going to be very successful. Is he going to be he's probably going to be, if a team really loves him, 3rd round, probably more like 4th round. So what? He gets into a team. He's going to infect change. He's going to be a positive player. Sebastian Castro had similar type running. He ran a 4.59 and was last among the defensive backs. So what?
Put on the tape.
Yeah. 4.59 is not the worst time in the world. That's actually not a bad time. It just happened to be with a position group that went pretty fast. And he's a safety. Put on the tape, as you said. Watch him hit people. Watch him cover people. Don't ask him to do something he can't do. Don't put him out there one-on-one with Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson. That's not how you win games. And if you do that, you deserve to get your ass fired. But you look at the other factors, the shuttle he was really good at, was 5th in that. That's movement.
Yep.
And then you put on the tape. Same thing with Caleb, 4.57. Oh, no, that's not what you're looking for from him. He's not a speed merchant. He's a banger, and he has elite getaway. And in the 10-yard, he's not as fast because he's bigger and more physical, and sometimes that doesn't translate well. So with all of those guys, and you look at them for what they do well, I didn't see a big problem. YA's numbers, you would have liked to have him be a little bit better, but you know what he's asked to do? Take up 2 blockers, not move. That's it. Now, Jamari is interesting for a couple of reasons, Rob, and you wrote about it. I talked to him there at length. And I also talked to several general managers and coaches about, not him specifically, because they'll never address that publicly, but about situations where players opt out during the season and during, even in the middle of a bowl game and in Cam Ward's case. But all of them, none of them told me that they would say, screw that kid. We're not doing it. They were like, for the most part, we'll take it case by case.
Yeah.
And we'll
That's smart.
And then, but then a couple, I think Carolina Panthers general manager in particular, Dan Morgan, who played at the U, played in the NFL, was like, I'm not criticizing anybody who has to make a business decision for their family and themselves. So, it's really, it's going to come down to kind of what we said before, that some teams they'll evaluate him because he's got good numbers, and he only did the vertical and the broad, and his vertical, 37 is really good. 37 and a half, I think it was. Really good. He's shown it on tape. They're going to evaluate him. And I asked him point blank. I said, anybody ask you about this? He goes, yes, everybody asked him about it. And I said, what did you say? And he kind of went into, this is a situation. This is what I did. And then it's going to be up to those teams to evaluate what do they believe it the way he said it? Do they think there's more to it? Iowa's not going to torch the kid at all. I mean, Iowa will just say, yeah, here's just what happened, and leave it at that. They're not going to say, he sucks, because they don't do that. And so it's going to be up to those teams. Some teams will say, you know what, I thought he could have played through it. He should have played through it. That's just not that kind of player for me. And other people are going to say, you know what, he needed to get that fixed. He was, let's look at the situation. They were 6-4. This was a 6th year. He needed to get this done. It was bothering him. It was only, I think he's worth it. And there's going to be 2 camps, and it's not going to be wrong, because one of them is going to like him. He's going to go. He's going to be drafted, and ultimately he'll get that opportunity to play his game and get paid for it.
And as we said before, these guys left, the Iowa guys are prepared for the combine. They're good dudes. They'll interview well. And at the end of the day, it's a business, right? The NFL is going to be like, yeah, we got to worry about character issues and things like that. I think you're going to be hard pressed to look at Jamari and talk to him and interview him and say, this kid has a character issue. He made a decision, and he knew that he would have to answer questions about it. But, as he told me, it was not taken lightly. A lot went into it. And everybody he talked to about it ended in a hug. Yeah. That's all the coaches, his friends, his family. So nobody's pissed at him at Iowa. Yeah. I'm sure initially there was some, I can't believe he's doing that, but when the dust settles, I think Jamari's still on pretty good footing when it comes to Iowa. And I think, as you said, the coaches will tell the NFL people what happened, and then they can make a decision on it. So, so be it.
Exactly. And so, and that's fair. And then once he gets into a camp, it's going to be up to him whether he makes it or not. And that's the way it should be. And as you said, Connor Colby, it was kind of funny because that was the last day, and I basically stayed a little bit longer in Indianapolis just because I like to see these guys at this level. I whether it's Luke Lachey, Connor Colby, over the years, you get to know them. You get to know them as people. Jay was the same way. I pulled him aside and talked to him, for a while, because you get like this 10 to 15 minute interview session, and then they go and they're off to this. But sometimes they walk off the podium and they're kind of like behind this curtain. And with Jay in particular and Luke, and then Connor, it was like, I'm going to go over there and just kind of say hi. And then they were just like, Connor was off the charts, so excited when he saw me there. He's like, wow, hey, even from the podium. And
I think people don't understand. I mean, they're still pretty young guys, and this is a big, you talk about being like nervous for a job interview. Yeah. Think about going over to, get a job at Staples or something like that. You're like, oh no, I'm going to a job interview. Think about where they are.
Yeah, right. This is big time. And they're with 329 guys, and they're all fighting for the same thing. But they're all friendly with one another. But it's so regimented in what they have to do. They're the medical exams, the interviews, the informals, the formals, the workouts, and then even dealing with media, and all of that matters, because how they deal with questions that are tough questions, or something that you really that they need to be a part of. But seeing him, he came like 20 minutes earlier than he was scheduled to. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh shoot, there he is. So I went over there, and then he was just beaming, and then
familiar face. Thank God, a familiar.
Right. And it's been that way over the years when you see guys like that. Luke was that way, Jay was that way. And then somebody asked him about his mullet, and it was really funny, and he was talking about it. And then after that, I said, so did that help you get engaged? On the stand, he just started laughing. He's like, if it would have been that easy, I would have done it a long time ago, or something like that. But and then, as you mentioned, Mason Richmond, it was a situation, I guess, where 18 teams have to recommend players, and 16 did for him. He's going to have, his pro day is a little over 2 weeks away, 2.5 weeks away. He'll be fine. He'll have his workouts. He'll have a ton of meetings. I think he'll get drafted. I believe that, you're a left tackle at Iowa for 4 years. Alaric had a couple of issues that kept him from being drafted. With him, there's none of those. Somebody will say, you know what, he's probably a guard at the next level. And this is the one thing that I've, over the years that I've talked to NFL people about Iowa is, and this is good, and in a couple of cases not so good, and that is what you see is what you get. So how they play, they're so well coached fundamentally and everything else that you can plug them in. They're like a second-year player. The one thing that they question a little bit is their upside potential, because sometimes you want a player that's not refined, not finished. You can make them better, and sometimes with Iowa, it's like, well, these guys are so good now. We're not sure that they're going to be any better in 4 years, and that's a small price to pay. I mean, that's and for somebody like Mason Richmond or Connor, probably YA Black, what you see is what you get. And if you're in the 6th or 7th round, and there's a couple lines of thought that goes into this for some of these teams. One is we need somebody. We're strapped against the cap. We don't have a lot of money here. We need somebody who can come in and play, and not really, flunk. We just, we have a 6th round pick. We have a spot. We need a hole. We know at least Mason Richmond or Connor Colby, we don't have to teach him how to block in a zone scheme. He knows what he's doing. And if it doesn't work out next year, we'll worry about it. But then there are other teams that, let's say they've got 49 out of their 53 already figured out, or 50, 45 or something like that. They only have like 6 or 7 spots open, and they get to the 6th or 7th round. It's like, we're going to swing for the fences. Maybe this guy has an injury history. Maybe he's a bad character. Maybe he's a guy that has a lot of talent, has never really paid off. We don't need a guy like Mason because he's not going to make our team anyway, because we're already set at that position group.
Yeah.
But we're going to take a home run swing. And if we miss, so be it. We don't care. Those are the two lines of camp that a lot of teams get into. And you look at, I think Mason will fall into the safe. And then there'll be other players. Luke Elkin was there at a specialist camp. It wasn't connected directly to the combine, but it was associated with it. I think there are a few other players Nick Jackson will get an opportunity for sure. Probably as a free agent, but Deontay Craig didn't get a combine invitation, but he'll get a free agent opportunity. And so, by and large, I think they'll do all right. They have a chance. I mean, 6 in the modern era, before like the 20-round eras and stuff of the draft, in the modern era, 6 has been the record for Iowa. I think that they got a really good opportunity to get 8.
That would be good news, and wish all those guys the best of luck in this pursuit. I know it's such an important time in their lives, and they're ready. They're ready for it, and all they need is an opportunity. That's all you can ask for, is just give me a chance, get me into camp, and let me see what I can do. Iowa, those are guys leaving the Iowa roster. There is an Iowa addition to the roster. Scott Brody Schaefer, wide receiver out of Winnicott. I think that's how you say it. Winnicott, Wisconsin. Yeah. 6'1", 184, wide receiver. And also had offers from Cornell, so he's smart. Not the Cornell in Mount Vernon. Not that the people that go to the Cornell in Mount Vernon aren't smart. It's just not the Cornell.
Yeah.
Lindenwood, North Dakota State, Northwestern, Texas State, and Washington State. He was somebody ascending this spring, starting to get more attention. Wisconsin was starting to get involved. Good get. Iowa now up to 7 verbal commitments in this class. You got Carson Nielsen, Hudson Parliament, Owen Linder, and Colin Witters on the line. Cash Herrera is your quarterback. Marcelo Vitti is a athlete defensive back here. I think I got them all. So good foundation to this class, Scott. And as we know, the old days of 20 to 25 person recruiting classes are gone. You're probably in the 15-ish range now with roster changes. So about halfway home on this group.
Yeah, I think it's a really good group, and they're in on some other ones too in this
Yep.
class, and so they are moving forward. I mean, to get they still have one more chance at another offensive lineman,
Yep.
and they'll take it's a take. He's too good
Yep.
at not, and but you look at this
Got
group,
offered by Penn State yesterday,
yeah,
by the way, I
yeah.
saw.
Well,
We'll see.
yeah,
I was in a great spot for Gino Riordan.
yeah. Gene Riordan, yeah,
Riordan.
yeah, yeah, and then again, those are the offensive linemen that are kind of Iowa to Chicagoland area guys. Iowa will fight for them, and Iowa will win some of those. They'll
Yep.
win even against the Michigans and Ohio States and Wisconsins and Penn States and Notre Dame sometimes for those guys because they have the production to back it up. And then it's not just about the name brand, it's about the fit and how do you develop. And they obviously developed really well in that area. So you've got to like the offensive line coming right off the bat. And then, and then the others, I mean, Marcelo Vitti, you kind of wonder about just because of where he lives in Detroit. Detroit's been great for Iowa over the years, obviously, and Phil Parker's been great. But sometimes you can get swayed by the locals. That's
That race is not over.
Yeah.
They're going to have to run that one through up to
Yeah.
signing day.
Yeah, exactly. And they've got one quarterback, but it sounds like they might have two.
Yep.
And good for them. You know what? Take as many swings at that as you can. You know that every other quarterback is going to transfer. It
Yep.
just happens. And they've had every single recruited quarterback transfer since 2017 onward or whatever. So what? Keep swinging. If you connect, then you're in great shape. So, if you bring in two, you expect one to transfer. I mean, oh, well, move on. I think that's kind of the attitude you got to take. And it's certainly, I think they got a really good foundation though with this class. And, I mean, Kirk Ferentz turned 70, this year. So you always kind of wonder in the back of your mind, but he's not really slowing down and neither is this program.
Yeah, that's going to be a challenge for them. They're probably having to deal with that on the recruiting trail because there just are programs that will bring that to recruits' attentions and use what they can just to kind of drop knowledge like that. But
Do you
big
think
recruit.
that's do you think that's a bigger deal now? I think it's a less of a big deal now than maybe it would have been 5 years ago because of the transfer portal and
Yeah,
everything. That now
yeah,
it's like, well, if he leaves, then I can leave,
yeah.
And
Freedom of yeah. It doesn't. It's not as big of a factor. I agree with you. And big recruiting weekend this weekend. It's junior day this week. Junior day weekend. So could have some more activity there that Scott and I will talk about next week. Going to wrap this up here. We're not going to waste your time with Scott and I breaking down Iowa wrestling in the Big Ten wrestling tournament because we would be talking out of our where we sit. So we just want to mention that Iowa is at the Big Ten wrestling championship this weekend in Evanston. We're not breaking any news. It's everybody's chasing Penn State, and it's almost like now, Scott, you want to see how close you can get. And that's really, you don't go in saying, oh, we can't win this. You go in saying we're going to wrestle to our fullest and, see where that puts us. Penn State has 5 number 1 seeds. Basically, when you want a good performance out of this, Scott, at the end of the day, it's usually, and again, not breaking news, it's guys wrestling to and above their seeds. And that's what Iowa needs this weekend.
Yeah, it's pretty much you can rinse and repeat on that one almost every single time, what they do. But you know, it's like a weird thing with Iowa wrestling because there is the perpetual expectations to be the best team in the country, and second doesn't matter. But you're not. And Penn State proved it. And Penn State is the most dominant program, and you're not either. So what you got to do is focus on what and Gable pressed this on to everybody else. And this is what kind of allowed people who lost, say, in the national semifinals to focus on what's, ahead of you. And that is, if you don't get what you want, get what's next, get the next best thing. And for Iowa, that's wrestle as hard as you can, as good as you can. And if you can get second in the Big Ten and then you can have a couple of champions Big Ten champions, then you're all right. Then you feel like, well, we wrestled as well as we could have. And,
And you're also measuring yourself against the other teams that are behind Penn State and trying to chase that dynasty and break it up. Because like when Iowa had its run going, everybody around the country is like, what can we do to bust this dynasty up and get in there? And that's what everybody's trying to do with Penn State right now. And where does Iowa, good win against Oklahoma State? They've had good duels this year beyond Penn State, but where do you, how do you measure up in a Big Ten tournament and a national tournament against the rest of the competition?
Yeah, exactly. And it's about, can you wrestle to your seat or beyond? And, you look at some weight classes where maybe you can take a step forward, and you look at, Gabe Arnold, for instance, didn't wrestle Carter Starucci, even though, he talked a lot of smack before that, but then they put Angelo Ferrari there, who's as good as any wrestler they have, but they're redshirting him. And, I'd say he might be the number 2 guy at 184, but Gabe Arnold's 4. He's seated 4th. So go out and get in the finals, if you can. Now that probably will be tough because you'll wrestle Starucci earlier, because of the bracket. But, do your best. If you're, Stephen Buchanan, go out and win it. Ben Keeter, you're seated 7th, go out, or pre-seeded 7th, go out and get something,
he's one that I think can, and that's not just because we know him better than some of the others because he plays football. You've got, the 2 giants at the top of that. Yeah. And then after that, he should be able to, I know he's had struggles but he's going to be wrestling guys that he's wrestled before now. What type of improvement can he show?
Exactly. I mean, let's be realistic. He's not going to be Gable Steveson or Greg Kirkcravet, but can he get to 3rd?
Yeah.
He's seated 7th. Can he get into, that 3rd, 4th territory? That's a big deal. And it's kind of that way with everybody. Drake Ayala, go win it.
Yep.
Joey Cruz at 125, you're 5th. Get into the semifinals and stay in that 3rd, 4th range. And that's what it is with everybody. And it's really, though, it is the difference between finishing, in this case, 2nd or finishing 4th. And 4th is horrendous, and 2nd is what it is. It's Iowa again. 2nd is not good.
But hopefully you can build some momentum going into next year as well. In these postseason, in the Big Ten and the Nationals, show that you're coming after Penn State. Give them some reason to be concerned with your performances at these 2 events. And I think because winning is just probably unlikely. It is unlikely. It's not probably unlikely. It's unlikely. So what's the best you can do?
One thing, Rob, that's just so unique about this situation is that Penn State has been able to gain a collection of wrestlers over and over and recruit the absolute best every single year. And even Iowa at its zenith, they've gotten, obviously they were at the top all these years, haven't been able to put together that collection like they have. And, whether that's Cale Sanderson, it's the location, it was the sleeping giant of wrestling, whatever, all of it matters. And, whereas Iowa had to deal with Iowa State and Oklahoma State, and then some other schools too Minnesota was good for a long time.
Yeah.
Even Penn State was good. It wasn't always great. But they were more spread out. Now it's centralized, and Iowa's, they got more NIL money than probably everybody. Maybe Penn State's got as much, but you're still battling this uphill battle. So you go to the transfer portal and you get the best ones, and they're still not being able to win against Penn State. That just shows you what a machine that is. But it's not impossible. They won a national title a couple of years ago. They would have won it in 2020 as well. And it's just going to take some time, and but it's frustrating. I can see that too.
Yes, no doubt. But you want an opportunity, and Iowa has a couple of opportunities to show that it's on the rise and not maybe just being put in its place by Penn State. Don't do that. To make some movement towards the top. and we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens this weekend. And then after that, I think it's in Philadelphia this year, the Nationals.
Yeah,
I can't remember. So
yeah.
that'll come up towards the end of the month. So we'll talk about that and follow it. What's going on here on the Hotspot podcast. As I said, Scott and I are not wrestling experts, but we don't want to leave it out. And we want to give those guys a little bit of time too to get some attention, give them their due. And hopefully we've done that at least on a cursory level. All right. We've gone a long time on this podcast, but there was a lot to talk about when you think about it being March 6th. Yeah. So not a dull moment, never a slow time in Hawkeye sports. Scott and I'll be back again next week to talk about it. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the basketball games, the wrestling, baseball, softball, track, gymnastics, tennis. There's a bunch of stuff going on. Check out HawkeyeSports.com if you want schedules. They'll give you the latest on your favorite Hawkeye teams. We'll be back next week to talk more about this stuff. Until then, be well. Say goodbye.